And finally, new rule, Republicans have to be honest about who these days is more deranged. They love to invoke Trump derangement syndrome, and there is some of that, but Trump really is doing things when it comes to ignoring court orders and using the Justice Department for partisan goals and deploying the military domestically that no one ever came close to doing before. So I don't feel especially deranged calling that out.
During the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, Maher dedicated his new rule-ending monologue to calling out Trump, MAGA Republican politicians like Mike Johnson, and Trump Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt for their hypocrisy and their pearl-clutching regarding extremism on the left, when at the same time they, unlike the Democrats, empower the crazies on the right. This is an asymmetry that I call out quite a bit, and I appreciate Maher, who enjoys the sympathies of many on the right, many right-wingers and Republicans like Bill Maher. I appreciate that he's using that camaraderie or those sympathies to say, actually, no, the Democrats don't do what you do, and it's not TDS to call it out. All right, friends, we have several clips to play from this Real Time with Bill Maher segment, but one thing I've always said that I appreciate about him is that he has no problem calling out Trump and Republicans and dispensing with the false equivalence. He uses that phrase a lot. He calls Republicans out, no, that's a false equivalence. Democrats don't do this, or they don't do it as bad. And so let's play some of the other segments from this, or clips from this new rule segment, to see him drive that point home.
But having your press secretary say that the Democratic Party's main constituency is made up of Hamas terrorists, illegal aliens, and violent criminals, that's deranged.
It is. It is deranged. Okay, so as you recall, we've done multiple videos about this. Trump's official spokesperson, the person who speaks on behalf of Donald Trump and the Trump administration, probably the second most visible person in the Trump administration as far as the media is concerned, you have the official Trump spokesperson, Carolyn Leavitt, saying infinitely worse, saying that the Democratic Party's main constituency, the people that actually support the Democratic Party, the people who comprise the Democratic Party, are pro-Hamas terrorists, violent criminals, and it's just insane. It really is. That, imagine a Democratic press secretary like Jen Psaki or Karine Jean-Pierre, both of whom work for President Biden, ever saying something like that. So again, I appreciate Bill Maher, who again has at times very often been too easily susceptible to right-wing framing of culture war issues. He is not letting this go, and I really appreciate that. Let's play another clip here. Again, the whole new rules segment is about 7 minutes and 30 seconds. We can't play it all, but here's another clip.
Now, are there dumb, college-age, useful idiots who march for Hamas? Yes, that exists, as does Democrats who stupidly enabled way too many migrants to enter the country. But that is a far cry from the main constituency of the party being terrorists or being illegal aliens. And violent criminals? Well, 7 million people came out last weekend for the big protest, and there was no violence. But there was a lot on January 6th.
I appreciate that too, right? So remember, the No Kings protest, that was nationwide, between 2,600 and 3,000 separate demonstrations nationwide. It was bigger than the June 14th new No Kings protest, okay? About 2 million more people, 7 million people total. And it was exceptionally peaceful. Even Mike Johnson begrudgingly conceded that multiple times. Well, congratulations, I guess, he said sarcastically, not burning anything down or killing anybody, when he said and suggested the entire time that it was going to be a violent spectacle, and we proved him wrong. Meanwhile, a much more local, much smaller scale, and therefore much more controllable protest, January 6th, became a violent insurrection against the federal government and an attempt by Donald Trump at a self-coup so he could unlawfully remain in power. And that just goes to show the contrast. It also says something that Republican politicians feel so comfortable demonizing this idea, no kings, that's anti-American. No, that is fundamentally American. And if you support Donald Trump or any president, Democrat or Republican, being a de facto king, you are anti-America, you are unpatriotic, and you should be relentlessly called out for your authoritarian, cultish, monarchist ways. If you want a monarch that badly, go back to England, go back to Great Britain. They still have a monarch. We don't have monarchs here in America, despite MAGA's best attempts to make Trump one. And we should continue to peacefully, but patriotically and loudly resist it. One last clip.
So yes, each side has its crazies, and I'll grant you, at least the right has found a place for theirs. Unfortunately, that place is elected government. It should not be the case that the White House press spokesperson sounds exactly like the worst Karen at Dollar General.
Exactly. That's the difference. And that's the one I wanted to close on, right? So we talk about this all the time. This has been a bugbear of mine and a theme of mine ever since I entered, public facing political commentary. When people say, well, the left has its extremists, the Democrats have their outliers. That's true. No mass social or political movement comprised of tens of millions of people, which is what political parties are going to be bereft of crazy people or outliers or extremists. It's inevitable. The only question, there are a couple of questions. How many, as a percentage in raw number, how many extremists and outliers do you have in this movement? And to what extent are their views reflected in the leadership, the thought, the spiritual, the political leadership of the movement? And do the spiritual thought and political leaders of a movement condemn the outliers? Well, we see that on the Democratic side. There is no Democratic equivalent to Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or Ted Cruz or who. Like there's just not like that. There is no Tim Burchett or Randy Fine in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party's crazies do not wield power. And to the extent you want to get super liberal, pun intended, and call AOC crazy, she's not. And she certainly has never said anything approaching the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said about the Democratic Party. AOC has never said anything like that or advocated anything like that for the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene has openly called the Democratic Party an evil, violent party of groomers and pedophiles. She said that publicly. AOC has never said such things about the Republican Party, despite their many, 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 many faults. So Bill Maher is right. The difference is, one of the biggest differences, the Republican Party takes their crazies and promotes them, elevates them, gives them state and political power. Like even the text scandal that we saw about, the young Republicans, the members of the young Republicans, talking about how much they love Hitler and all these things. Those were Republican leaders. And some of them were not just Republican leaders, but they actually worked and wielded power in state, local, and federal government. You just don't see comparable things, and certainly not in the same numbers on the Democratic side. And I'm sorry, this is a meaningful distinction. This is why the Democratic Party on its worst day, and it has many bad days, is better for this country than the Republican Party on its very best.
Hello, everybody. This is Politics by Jake. This is your reporter, commentator, and advisor, Jake. And I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles, as I usually do, the City of Angels. Each week we bring a strategic briefing, our overview of world-shaping historical events, a map of the forces shaping history, and the moves that matter. The aim is simple: to help those, wherever they stand, add to their own weight to the right side of the story, to reveal not only what's happening, but why, and what it means for those determined to act. And this is Politics by Jake. Okay, and as we start the show, you just heard that interesting observation, a couple of things from a colleague, and also some clips from Bill Maher. And I think that these clips are very relevant. You see, the thing with the fascist right is that they don't think that they do any of the things that they do, but they think that we do the same things. And there's a reason for this. The reason why is because these are the things that they think in their mind. And they think it's natural that because they think and do these things, and these are murderous thoughts, honestly, that they have in their mind. I'm sorry to say it. I know some people are going to say, oh, Jake has gone around the bend on this, and he's just calling. I'm sorry. This is just the way it is. And they have no more sense than to think that we must think the same things. And so they feel justified in saying the things that you just heard in the clips. But as you also heard my colleague observe, we don't do these things. There is no comparison between the Democrats and the Republicans, and I use the term very loosely, Republicans, because Republicans typically are considered to be conservatives, and these people are not conservatives at all. they're backwards, they're reactionary, and they're fascist. Now, there's a difference. Reactionaries have backward political beliefs, like, for example, the return to slavery, chattel slavery. That's a backward political belief. But you have people who desire that. That's reactionary. That's a backwards belief, backwards political belief. But reactionaries generally try to work within the system. They don't try to overthrow the system with violence. They will stand by and watch while others overthrow the system with violence. And the main difference between them and fascist is a fascist, well, and of course, as I've articulated on this show several times, you have the Giovanni Gentili definition, 1922, that was the definition that, interestingly, 14 years later, you had Franklin Delano Roosevelt confirming, which is fascism is control of the means of production by business or by private interest. That's the 1922 Gentili definition. But an apt definition and an entirely appropriate definition are those who have reactionary political beliefs and who use violence to enforce those beliefs. That's a fascist. And as my colleague pointed out, you have all of these people on the right who say all of these crazy things, and there is no comparison on the left or among the Democrats. I don't like to call the Democrats the left because, I mean, what are we talking about? Left of Attila the Hun, or what does exactly that mean? I know what it means, but I have a problem calling the Democrats left on the left because the discussion has, in the past 40 years since Ronald Reagan, moved so far to the right that really I have, difficulty attributing that to them. And now let's pause for a brief commercial message. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And now we're back. But okay, so we have some interesting things to talk about, and I'm kind of going to we're a couple of days past Halloween, but I'm going to kind of do a Halloween type of show, or at least a Halloween segment that I hope will scare the heck out of you. But for now, here's an open letter that I wanted to read to you from Dr. Michael Baker. And Dr. Michael Baker is a Rear Admiral of the United States Navy. And he writes this by way of warning. And I'll read it to you now and then make a few comments. And he begins. Folks, this is Dr. Michael Baker, Rear Admiral, U.S. Navy, retired. I'm writing to you on behalf of Vote Vets today. In my time, I had numerous deployments and assignments, doing policy and strategic planning across 3 decades in uniform. 2 days ago, and this is a few days more than that I'm reporting it from, Donald Trump ordered the USS Gerald R. Ford, one of our most powerful aircraft carriers, into the Caribbean alongside 8 other warships and a nuclear submarine. Around the same time, Stephen Miller dodged a question about sending American troops to Venezuela. And yesterday, on CBS News, Senator Lindsey Graham spoke of Trump's plan to brief members of Congress on an expansion of operations, quote, from the sea to the land. It's clear, he states, that Donald Trump wants a war. Colin Powell had something to say about the use of force and bars that must be met. Let's consider just 4 of his 8 points here. First, is a vital national security interest threatened? The nation of Venezuela poses no threat to the United States. We use the Coast Guard and law enforcement to stop drug boats rather than million-dollar munitions to perform extrajudicial killings of unknown people. I participated in river and coastal patrol, and a board and search is the way to determine who is on the boat and what is on it. Second, do we have a clear, attainable objective? The administration's goal is to show the world how tough Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are. And that's true. This is me talking. This is all performative. It's all performative. It's all distractive. It's all designed to feed the sickness that resides in Donald Trump. And honestly, I think will never be cured. I mean, I think he's going to die being the way he is whenever death comes for him, as it comes for everyone. He's going to be this way. I don't think there's any redemption for him as far as his psychological and mental condition is concerned. So, okay. The truth, of course, and this is Dr. Michael Baker talking again. The truth, of course, is that both are insecure and out of their depth. Both are trying to consolidate power further. And this is why, and this is me talking again, this is why I warn you all the time, and some of my colleague journalists are picking up on this, to be worried about the 2026 elections, because those are the ones, if Congress goes over, the House, for example, will immediately begin impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump and also several of the members of his cabinet. And he can't let that happen. So yeah, he's definitely interested in holding on to power, and he's going to do it whatever way he can. We saw, and this is still me talking, we saw on January 6th, 2021, the lengths to which Donald Trump would go to stay in power, and that he would stop at nothing. And I asked the question, and this is still me talking, what makes you think that now will be any different? I can guarantee you it won't. Okay, moving on with Dr. Baker. Perhaps they hope to distract, and I've talked about this, perhaps they hope to distract from the Epstein files and Trump's destruction of the White House, like a family crime boss or a crime family boss. Third, have the risks and the costs been fully and frankly analyzed? We risk exacerbating an 80-year tradition of making more enemies and further isolating our country. We will spend millions per day to deploy the Ford Carrier Battle Group, while federal employees line up at food banks, while kids lose school lunches, and poor families lose even basic health care. And finally, have all other nonviolent policy means been fully exhausted? What about diplomacy, foreign aid, Voice of America? How about USAID, which is designed to help less fortunate people rather than bombing them? We know that those haven't been exhausted because Doge cut them all and destroyed them. Still, history shows that generosity and compassion, as we saw with the Marshall Plan's rebuilding of Europe including assistance to former enemy combatants, turned those nations into staunch allies. Powell emphasized the importance of a nation exhausting all political, economic, and diplomatic means, which, only if all were futile, would result in the condition that the nation should resort to military force. We have exhausted none of those means. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Trump and Hegseth didn't learn a thing after 2 decades of needless war tore our country apart. Their childlike vindictiveness will ruin our country further if we let it. But that story is not yet written. No, not yet. The American people don't want another war, least of all the veterans who fought the last ones. We have time, still, to join our voices in opposition before it's too late. And thank you, Dr. Baker. And at this point, I think we'll take a break and have a few messages, and then we'll be right back. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All righty, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And by the way, have you heard this? The reason why Trump wants to cancel early voting, mail-in voting, it's all about the intimidation. Let me read this to you. This is a recent story from Raw Story. Quote, President Donald Trump announced Sunday that mail-in ballots and early voting would be prohibited for the upcoming midterm elections. Do you see why I talk about 2026 the way I do? It's happening. You're watching the progression of it right before your eyes, and you're hearing it in your ears from people like me. Citing false claims, going back to the article, citing false claims that the 2020 election had been rigged. Where have we heard that before? Have we done? Has the little boy cried wolf once too often? For those of you who voted for Trump, for those of you who are not sure whether he's telling the truth, even after all these years, what did Hitler say in Mein Kampf? What did he say to Joseph Goebbels? He said, and Joseph Goebbels was his propaganda minister. He said lies. Goebbels said, what shall we tell the people, mein Führer? And Hitler said lies. Tell them lies. The bigger, the better. Sooner or later, something is bound to stick. And what bigger lie is there than that the 2020 election had been rigged? And he has no authority, by the way, to outlaw such voting practices, but his idea of authority is Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. That's his idea of authority. So anyway, look what happened to our country when a crooked moron became our president. We now know everything Trump, and this is his bloviating. We now know everything Trump wrote on his social media platform, Truth Social. He has a mania about him that sustains him on very little sleep. And he's done this literally for decades. without stopping. In New York, the media used to call him the mouth because he never would shut up. And he was rich, obviously eccentric, mentally unstable and mentally ill is what he is, but obviously eccentric, and he was always good. The media was always good, and he loved the media because he loves the attention. He loves the flattery because, mommy and daddy, they didn't love him. And that's about as simple as it gets and about as true as it gets. And I encourage you to check out the various mental health providers like Russell Razak, who I have on their show, clips on their show, like Mary Trump, who talks about him all the time, and she would know. She's his niece. She's also a board-certified psychologist. Bandy X. Lee from worldmentalhealth.org, and many other mental health providers. They'll all basically tell you the same story about the dangerous case of Donald Trump. So here's his bloviating. I hope the DOJ pursues this with as much gusto as befitting the biggest scandal in American history. If not, it will happen again, including the upcoming midterms, which is to say, and this is Donald Trump saying, they'll be rigged against him again. You see how he operates? Have you done, I ask you, with believing the nonsense and the lies that come out of this person's mouth? And then he ends it by saying, no mail-in or early voting. Yes to voter ID. Trump had previously vowed, and I'm reading from the article, to eradicate mail-in ballots back in August, which is funny because he voted by mail. And again, without having the authority to do so. In his social media post on Sunday, however, he also, and I'm talking about Sunday a week ago, he also vowed to eradicate early voting and singled out California for its upcoming ballot measure to redraw its congressional districts, a measure passed in response to Texas's redistricting that was designed to bolster the GOP number in Congress. Watch how totally dishonest the California prop vote is. Millions of ballots being shipped. Do you understand? Do you understand the idea of the big lie? Do you understand the need for repetition? This is what you're seeing here. It's the Hitlerian technique. Trump wrote, with it being unclear what millions of ballots, he was referring to, because the election hasn't happened yet. Get smart Republicans, in caps. Get smart Republicans before it is too late. And so the Trump administration has deployed Justice Department officials to monitor California's upcoming election in a move that critics have decried as a form of voter intimidation, and it is. Such things, and he doesn't have the authority to do this. It's illegal for him to do this. He states, what's worse, the NBA players cheating at cards and probably much else, or the Democrats cheating on elections. The 2020 presidential election being rigged and stolen is a far bigger scandal, Trump wrote. This is a mentally ill person who's in charge of the country. And he was in charge of the country when this election occurred. And yet it was rigged, and it was stolen from him. So here's the thing, or the things. If a person can vote early, if they can mail in their ballot, Trump can't intimidate him with his nonsensical election observers, his dangerous election observers, his threatening election observers. And again, let's not have any question about this, shall we? The reason this is all being done, including the war with Venezuela and all the troops he wants to put or has put in American cities, is because he wants to hinder or completely destroy the possibility of a free and fair election, absent these BS intimidations. And I take it that you all understand what I mean when I say BS. like the federal troops, like the threats about the Sedition Act, like the prospective arrest of governors, like Pritzker of Illinois, like the phony baloney election observers. It's all because of that. So be advised and be warned. And this, by the way, this is me talking. I've been talking for about 2 minutes now. I've been reading the article. Be advised. Be warned. Why? Because they literally propose to have their cake and eat it too. They want to control the narrative by first accusing the Democrats of violence, second, by saying that they're going to perpetrate the violence in advance, and then any violence that happens, any at all, based on the old, and it's a form of logical fallacy. It's an old Roman proverb. It's post hoc, ergo propter hoc. And post hoc, ergo propter hoc, it's a Latin phrase. It means after this, therefore because of this. And it refers to, as I say, it's a logical fallacy, where one assumes that because event B followed event A must have caused event B. This fallacy occurs when a causal relationship is inferred, not proven, but inferred solely based, and this is why it's a logical fallacy, solely based on the temporal sequence of events, without sufficient evidence to support the claim. In other words, it might be, but it is not necessarily the case. The fallacy is also known as the post hoc fallacy. False because fallacy, or faulty causation, and it is particularly problematic because the mere chronological order does not establish a cause and effect relationship. It's often seen in everyday reasoning, such as attributing a health issue to a recent vaccination or blaming a tenant for a building's malfunction simply because the problem arose after their arrival, so on and so forth. Okay, now that you've had your Latin lesson and logic lesson for today. So then any violence that happens at all, which could even be agents provocateur sent by Trump himself in the crowds or one of his flunkies, no matter how outrageous the ICE Gestapo is, and they are, no matter how much violence and self-defense, or just simply because of pure outrage at the fact that they're doing things like tear gassing children, tear gassing ministers in the act of prayer, ministers of the gospel in the act of public prayer, is violence that allows them to point and validate their narrative. And again, it's devilish. And we're going to continue with this. We're at the point where we have to take another break. Let's do that, and then we'll come right back and we'll continue this. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake. Thank you for that, Twain Consulting. And I want to get back to that. We're talking about the Republicans, these fascists, these reactionaries, having their cake and eating it too by controlling the narrative, by accusing the Democrats of violence. So in case any violence, just anything at all that happens, they can point to and say, see, we were telling the truth. And it's devilish because the technicians, and by the way, when I say that, there are several aspects of these combinations. And you know that at Politics by Jake, we do occasionally talk about the idea of the secret combination, and we favor talks about secret combinations, which are more grounded in fact than we do over conspiracy theories, which are nuts. We do not favor conspiracy theories because they're will-o'-the-wisp. There's a Halloween phrase for you, will-o'-the-wisp. And too often, they are the products of either an overly active imagination or some calculating person who's basically seeking to stir up trouble. And there are different aspects of a secret combination, and one of them are the technicians. And the technicians are the ones who, among other things, plan out these various things. And it is they of whom I speak when I say that surely it is they who are the promulgators and the planners and the perpetrators of this violence. And they have been the perpetrators of the violence. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. And they love to have it so. It's what they want to do. As I pointed out with Dr. Russell Razak has said, and I myself have pointed out, it is what they want to do. And they impute it to the Democrats because they think the Democrats are just like them and think about the same things. And they don't. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show, and we showed that there really isn't any comparison. So by this means that I'm talking about here, they literally propose to have their cake and eat it too. And like I said, it's devilish. They want to control the narrative by first accusing the Democrats of violence, second, saying that they're going to perpetrate violence even before the event has started, and then any violence that happens, any at all, which could even be agents provocateur in the crowds, no matter how outrageous the ICE Gestapo is, no matter how much violence and self-defense, or simply because of pure outrage at the fact that they're doing things like tear gassing ministers of the gospel and children, is violence that allows them to point out and validate their narrative. And just to enumerate a little of what's going on so that you have a sense of what I'm talking about, let me just list a few things here. And we're going back a ways to Trump's first administration. In November of 2018, you had border agents firing tear gas at migrant groups in Tijuana and San Ysidro. U.S. agents deployed chemical agents against chemical agents. That's so academic. Chemical agents. Tear gas against migrants at the Mexico-U.S. line during caravan encounters. There were families and children in the area. Family separation, that's 2018 too. Children removed from parents. The administration policy referred to as zero tolerance resulted in thousands of children separated from parents. Reports of chaotic tracking, poor record keeping, children placed in HHS custody. So they used institutionalized separation as a policy. Parents torn from kids, no system ready to track them. They kept some of these kids in cages, as I recall. You have Lafayette Square clearing, June 1st, 2020. Federal officers moved demonstrators to enable a presidential photo of Trump holding a Bible upside down. Federal officers used force, chemical irritants. There you have the academic chemical irritants to clear its tear gas, to pepper spray, to clear peaceful protesters from Lafayette Square. The action preceded President's walk to a church for a photo in which he, typically doofus that he is, held a Bible upside down. And this was timed, and it was carried out by federal officers. It wasn't simple crowd control, but it was a political operation. 2019, and this is ongoing, mass workplace arrests, raids where families and communities are destabilized. Tactics in some videos account include forceful handcuffing, rough entries. These aren't precise enforcement actions. They're mass roundups that rip livelihoods apart. You have deaths, you have mistreatment, you have neglect in ICE Gestapo detention. You have surge in enforcement weaponry. Investigations and watchdog reports document deaths and abusive conditions in detention facilities, and an increase in spending on militarized gear for ICE Gestapo, raising concerns about escalation and accountability. When the agency detains people and they die in custody, that's not a failure of paperwork. That's a crisis of oversight. And you have reports of aggressive federal immigration sweeps in United States cities, 2024, 2025. What happened? You have local reporting and watchdog outlets documented raids, the use of crowd control projectiles, and confrontations where bystanders and journalists were affected. Federal sweep tactics have increasingly looked like paramilitary operations in neighborhoods, not targeted law enforcement. All right, so there you have it. There's the ugly truth about the Trump administration. And we're not even a year into it. And at this point, let's take another break. And we will be back afterwards. And I'll have my own kind of Politics by Jake horror story for you for Halloween. And this is Politics by Jake, and we will return. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And I'm kind of excited about this segment of the show. As you know, Politics by Jake, history, we feel is very important, because if you don't learn the lessons of history, you are doomed to repeat them. I'm sure you have heard that all through school. But I fear that we do not pay much attention to them. And since it's around holiday, and I know this is Sunday, but since it's around Halloween, we just had Halloween, I wanted to share with you a real economic horror story, and it's the story of the Great Depression, and it's the story of how the Great Depression became the Great Depression. And I'm really kind of excited to share this with you, so I hope you enjoyed as much as I do, and here we go. So the Great Depression, it practically the end of October, back in 1929, practically Halloween, like October 29th, and the days around it went on for a good week or so, and actually what happened that I'm going to tell you about goes back into late September. But what caused this? Well, it was caused by a bubble economy. And the bubble economy was caused by what is called hot money from all around the world going into Wall Street in the form of brokers' call loans. And you may not be familiar with that term, but a broker's call loan. So just so you're familiar with this, because I know there are a lot of people in the market, but I know there are a lot of people who are not in the market. So I want you to understand this, because this is very important, because what I'm explaining to you is really what happened. A broker's call loan, they're basically the same thing. They're like cousins. This is the money the brokerage itself borrows from a bank or another financial institution to fund its customers' margin trading. The call part means the lender, which is the bank, can demand repayment at any time, literally on call. You've heard the phrase margin call. That's kind of what it is. When interest rates change or the markets get unstable, the bank can call in the loan and the brokerage has to pay it back fast. Often by calling in the customer's margin balances, because a lot of stocks and a lot of securities are purchased on margins. They're not purchased outright. So now a margin loan, this is the money you borrow from your broker to buy securities. You put up some of your own cash, which is the margin. That's the margin. And the broker lends you the rest. And it uses the securities you bought as collateral. If the value of those securities drops, the broker can issue a margin call, which forces you to either add cash or sell holdings. So in short, a broker's call loan they're the same thing. They're just different. They're different in that a broker's call loan is between the bank and the broker. A margin loan is between the broker and the customers. Both of them are built on leverage, and leverage is debt that is used to buy assets, and both can really unwind fast in a panic. And this is what we're about to see. This is why they're dangerous. In a downturn, one call triggers another, and the whole system deleverages at an alarming rate. Okay, and I'm kind of already hinting at what happened. So, all right, so you understand that this is, you borrow money to buy stock. You don't always, you can buy it outright. But if you don't, you're buying it on the margins, and it means it's highly leveraged. You maybe have some down payment, maybe not, but you're there. In those days, there were no regulations. If you have a margin loan, that's a lucrative interest rate for anybody in the world who wants to send money to New York. And in those days, it was done by actually sending gold ingots, which is monetary gold. The British had gone off the gold standard in the war, but they wanted to return to it. And the problem was at that time, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is basically the finance minister, was Sir Winston Churchill. And he had to ask himself, what do we want to do with the British pound sterling? Do we want to export, or do we want to buy things? And it was easy for him to say, we don't want to, exports we may or may not have, but we want to buy things. So we want a high pound. And we want to have a pound that will be elevated compared to other forms of currency. And the way he did this was return to a gold parity, with just the gold standard, for a pound. But it was maybe 10 or 15% too high. And that meant that the pound had to be constantly defended, because the markets could see that the pound was too high. They could see that the gold exchange rate was too high and that they should have taken it down 10 or 15%. They would have fared much better, but someone had whispered, and I can tell you who it was. It was, in my opinion, Lord Montague Norman of the Bank of England, whispered in Churchill's ear, I will make you the golden chancellor. Golden, golden, golden. And it was just like that. I'll make you the golden chancellor of the exchequer. So what that meant was, if they were going to do this, Lord Montague Norman of the Bank of England plus Helmer Schacht of the Reichsbank in Germany. Yeah, the Reichsbank in Germany. He was later Hitler's finance minister. He's a great ally of Hitler and the French and some others, Banque de France. What they would do is they would come over to New York, and sometimes they'd come as a committee of 3 or 4. All of these guys. They'd come to New York, and they'd look up Benjamin Strong. Now, who is Benjamin Strong? Benjamin Strong came out of Bankers Trust. He was the head of the Federal Reserve. And the guy was, he's a House of Morgan guy, because that is Bankers Trust. And when I talk about Morgan, I mean J.P. Morgan. So what they would say to him is this, and the United States shouldn't have done it, but they would say, print more dollars, generate domestic inflation in the United States, let's get a nice stock market bubble going. And that will be nice for a while, won't it? And in that way, if the dollar is somehow overvalued, that will relieve pressure on the pound. Because the problem was there were these things called the gold points. And the gold points were the point at which, if you're an overvalued pound, British pound, you'd have to start shipping some of your monetary gold to New York or someplace else in order to get back in this sort of internal discipline of the gold standard, which, I don't recommend the gold standard. Any attempt to go back, be it the British after the Teutonic Wars, the United States after the Civil War, the British after World War I, or the fantasies, of Ron Paul and these people. Return to the gold standard means deflation. And it means that if you owe $10 of paper dollars, when they're gold dollars, it's going to be more like 1,000 at the current rate. The official price of gold used to be $35 an ounce. Now it's over 4,000. So that's not something that you want to get into. You don't want to have all your debts transformed in that way. Okay. So all right. So the result of this is that especially when Hoover becomes president, the inaugural market, which is the New York Stock Exchange, takes off, goes into the wild blue yonder, reaching a peak around, as I say, September 3rd, September 4th of 1929. And very soon after that, there's this guy, and his name is Babson. And he's like a market guru. And he comes out and he says, this is a bubble. And something you've got to watch out. There could be a correction or a crash. There's something going on. And that's called the Babson break. But the thing that actually sets the crash in motion is, again, Lord Montagu of the Bank of England decides he's going to increase the British bank rate. In other words, increase the official interest rates charged by the Bank of England and the City of London. And don't get me started on don't get me started on all of this. I'm doing too much already for you guys, but this stuff, you all really need to know about this stuff, and eventually in Politics by Jake we'll get to it. But in other words, this would they're going to increase the official interest rates charged by the Bank of England in the City of London, and the entire British interest rate structure goes, it depends on this. So word then, or the action coming from Lord Montagu Norman, is September 26th. That's why I said this began to happen in late September. And it's about a month before the great crash in New York. September 26, 1929, Lord Montagu raises the British bank rate around midday from 5.5% to 6.5%. So from 5.5 to 6.5 goes the London bank rate. And of course, that creates what has been called the giant sucking sound. Because all of the hot money that had been in New York that was committed to those broker margin loans that I told you about at the beginning of the segment is literally sucked back across the North Atlantic. And it literally means putting gold ingots onto ships in special strong rooms. The giant sucking sound is the hot money leaving New York, and it goes to London. And within 1 month, panic breaks out in New York. And the crash of 1929 is on. Now, I stress this thing. 5.5% to 6.5% is somehow the central event of the pre-crash. Okay, and that's the end of our show. The next edition of Politics by Jake drops on November 8th. And until then, good morning, good afternoon, or good night from Los Angeles, and good luck to those of you who are still in the fight. And this is Politics by Jake. The world is unraveling fast. Governments are weakening, markets are crashing, chaos is looming. You need more than hope. You need a plan. Collapse Protocol gives you the tools to protect your assets, secure your future, and survive the storm. Don't wait for the collapse to hit. Prepare now. Visit Twain Consulting at facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call 213-465-0639. Collapse Protocol, your shield when everything else fails.